This is Work University, episode 36. This is Work University, and I'm Annalisa Felix. This is where I interview people from various employment backgrounds and get the inside scoop on what their job is really like. If you're just getting into the workforce, or if you're curious about getting into something new, listen up. I'd like to welcome Special Agent Michael Miller of the DEA Drug Enforcement Administration. Welcome, Michael, to Work University.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
What is a special agent with the DEA?
Special agent with the DEA is a law enforcement official, and we are charged and tasked with enforcing the nation's drug laws.
What does your day-to-day look like?
So the great thing about this job is there's no set day-to-day. The day-to-day could involve sitting in your car on surveillance. It could involve in the office doing paperwork. It can involve being out on the street, trying to arrest somebody. It can be involved with executing warrants. It really varies, and that is really one of the best parts of this job.
Okay. Do you have a caseload?
You do, yes. You work in a group. The group can be made up of other special agents. It can be made up of a combination of special agents and law enforcement officers from local and state agencies, and you work together. You can have your own cases. You can work with someone else in your group, but each person has their priority cases that they're responsible for. Okay, so I can imagine that you have a caseload of, let's just say, 10, for example, but each of those have different due dates or arrest dates, or how do you manage those? How do you prioritize? So there's no set dates per se. You work the investigation and go wherever the investigation takes you. The investigation can be a couple days. The investigation can be a couple years. It depends. It depends on the investigation. The goal of the DEA is always to work up the chain. So we always want to go for the highest level traffickers. So sometimes you start in the middle. Sometimes you start at the bottom and you work your way up. Sometimes you start at a high level. It really all depends. There's no set time frame for anything.
So are you on a 80-hour week? Are you on a 40-hour week? Or are you just always on call? How does that work?
So we have built-in overtime. It's called availability pay. So you have your salary, and then you have 25% built in. So basically what that means is you are expected to be available, say, for an extra 2 hours after work. So sure, you may go home at 5, but you're expected to be available if that phone rings until 7. But with that, since there's no overtime, I've had instances where I've worked days straight. Is what it is. Again, you work whatever the case dictates you work. Mm-hmm. So there are set hours. I would say normally that's a fair assessment, but you need to be prepared that when depending what the case is happening, what your target is doing, you may work until midnight. You may work until the following day. Again, everything is based on what happens in your case.
So can you tell us what is the most exciting part about your job, and then what is some not so exciting parts about your job?
I'll start with the not exciting part, because to get to the exciting parts of the job, you have to do the not exciting parts of the job.
Yeah.
And that's the paperwork. That's the going through intelligence, that's going through records, that's writing reports. All that leads up to the writing of the warrants, the getting indictments, if that's what you're doing, and ultimately leads to the fun stuff of putting handcuffs on people. The fun stuff is we have offices all over the world. Mm-hmm. We have 91 offices in 68 countries. So wherever the target is, you can go there. So I've traveled all over the world doing this. And to me, the travel, I've lived in Canada, because we have an office up there, which was exciting. So seeing the world and working with counterparts all over the world and just seeing the breadth and scope of what we do and how we do it as an agency is exciting. I mean, obviously the arresting is exciting. Obviously the stuff that you see on TV is exciting. But for me, it's all the other stuff. It's the stuff that leads up to that. It's the surveillance. For me, I like surveillance. So sitting in a car for hours on end, watching something or following somebody is exciting. I enjoy that. But there's a lot of exciting parts of this job.
Is it like you see on TV?
No. I mean, let's just be honest. It's not. There are no cool screens that put everything together for you. You're not constantly running after somebody. The majority of the time is spent doing the stuff that's not seen on TV. It's the paperwork. It's the phone calls. It's the report writing. It's the warrant writing. It's piling over pages of information. It's really developing your case. That's the majority of your time.
Yeah, it sounds like if you're on one case, it could lead you down a path, say, where you need to travel to another state. And then could it also mean that you cross into other people's territories and police enforcement and things like that? Does that happen?
Yes. Most of the cases that I've worked and been a part of have gone across the country, have been in other countries. And because we have offices all around the country and, like I said, all over the world, there's a lot of deconfliction that goes on. So you're constantly calling other offices if it goes into, say, I worked in California, so say it goes someplace else, Atlanta. You're calling Atlanta saying, hey, I have this. Have you guys seen this? Does this run into what you're doing? Sometimes you do database checks to see. So, yeah, there's constant deconfliction with cases as they expand. And even locally, you conflict with your local counterparts to see if they have something on what you're working.
Getting into more of the training or the education for your job, what did you have to do? Did you have to go through a certain type of training, physical training, testing? What did you have to go through to once you were hired?
Once you go through the application process and get hired, you go to Quantico. And the Quantico, it's around 20 weeks, and that's like over. It's on the Marine base. It's near the FBI Training Academy. In fact, we share certain facilities with the FBI Training Academy. So you're there for 19 weeks, and that's where you learn the real basics of DEA, the reports you'll have to use. You learn firearms, you learn surveillance techniques, all that type of stuff. The real foundation of being an agent. And then once you graduate the academy, and that's when you start putting all that to practice.
And so, did you always want to be a special agent?
I always wanted to do federal law enforcement. I went between a few different agencies. The hiring process now is different than it was when I went through. It's streamlined more. They've done a good job at streamlining it. But when I went through, it took 3.5 years to get hired from when I initially applied. I applied as soon as I graduated college, and I didn't get hired until I was 25 years old. So it took some time. And in there, like I said, I applied to other agencies, FBI, Capitol Police Service. So I always knew I wanted to be in law enforcement. I knew I wanted to do it federally.
That's a long time to wait. And was it you applied and you waited and didn't hear back, or was it just, okay, now you have to go through this and then you have to go through this, or was it just that long period of 3 years that you didn't hear anything?
I would hear every now and again. I kept moving through the process. Like there's a polygraph, there's a psych test, there's a PT test, there's a written test, there are oral interviews to go through. So I was moving along, but just the gaps in between were very long. But now they've done a good job of streamlining it. So now once you're in the process and you meet the basic qualifications, now you do most of that over a weekend. So now what was a couple years, I was still on the long side of 3.5 years, but what was once a couple-year process has been streamlined down a lot.
Now, what can a person coming into this career in the beginning expect to be paid? What is the pay structure like from the low end and even to the high end after many years?
Well, it's all readily available. So we're on what's called the GS pay scale, and that's available online to see. Typically, agents will start at a GS 7, and it goes by locality. So say someone in California has higher locality pay than someone in Nebraska, for instance, just because cost of living is different. But you can expect, what was told to me by my recruiter at the time is, within a few years, you can expect to be making what I consider to be a very good salary. You can be making a six-figure salary. Mm-hmm. And remember, that's with the 25% built-in overtime.
Well, yeah, you're putting your life at risk, too.
Yeah, for sure.
Are there any situations that stand out in your mind that maybe you thought, this could be it, for me, this is very dangerous? Is there anything that you'd like to share without getting too specific?
Sure. There's always this one example that I go to that I think of. One, because I was younger, and when you're younger, you're so eager and you do things without really thinking.
Sure.
And so, one case we were waiting for the target to come back, and we knew that they were going to come back and go to this car. So I volunteered. I'll sit in the car and wait until he shows up. And it was a small little SUV. And I jump into the car, and I forget my radio, and I forget my phone. And I'm sitting in the car, and I start hearing a sound. I hear, hey. And it's pretty close to, car was parked pretty close to a open window, so I thought it was someone in the house it was parked by. Mm-hmm. Minutes go by, and I hear that again. And I look in the window, and no one's in the window in the house, so I don't think much of it. And then I hear it one more time, and it finally dawns on me. The person I'm waiting for is already sitting in this car. And they were in the back of the car.
In your car? In the car you were sitting in?
In the car I was sitting in.
Oh, no.
So I don't have a radio, and I don't have my phone, so I can't call anybody to tell them, hey, the target is already in the car. And so I get out of the car, and I walk to the back, and luckily this person was waiting for his friends to come back, and obviously not me to sit in the car. So when I pop the back of the car open, and arrest them, and a few seconds later, everyone else on my team shows up. That's what happened. What happened? The whole time he was sitting in the car. I think everyone that does this job has those moments. So I was really lucky.
Moving more towards people who want to get into this career, what kind of person is the DEA looking for, and what advice can you give to someone who wants to follow in your career path?
I once received very sage advice from a mentor of mine who was a high-ranking official in a police agency. And he said the most important thing is to hire good people. You can teach anyone to do this job, but you got to make sure that they're a good person. So that's first and foremost. You got to be a good person. You got to be a hard worker. You got to be self-motivated. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of freedom with this job. You're expected to do your work. You're given a government car. You come and go. You got to be able to handle that. You got to be able to take that freedom and still produce. So you really have to be self-motivated. That's the big thing. If you're a good person, a hard worker, and self-motivated, sky's the limit.
And are there any programs or things that you would recommend to somebody who wants to either learn more about the position in depth, or are there any shadowing programs or any mentorships for students?
For that, you would contact whatever local field division you're closest to see if there are any opportunities for students, whether it be paid or not. There aren't many, to be honest, but there are a few. You could always talk to the local recruiter in whatever division you're from to get a sense of it. The biggest thing and the hardest thing, I think, is just getting in law enforcement. Whether it's local, county, state, federal, the hardest part is getting in. It's just getting your foot in the door. So be mindful that it's going to take some time. Be mindful. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Like I said, I applied to many different agencies. Really branch out. If this is what you want to do, branch out.
So are you saying maybe get into like your local law enforcement while you're applying?
Yes, and that's part of what I did. While the application was going on, I became a detective at a prosecutor's office. Get life experience. And some recruiters will say that too. They're looking for people. You don't have to come from a law and justice background in college per se. Having life experience having work experience will set you apart from just the person applying right out of college.
Michael, I thank you so much for your time and for giving us an insider's look on what it's really like to be a DEA special agent.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening. I hope you liked this episode. If you have a particular job you'd like me to look into, send me an email at workuniversityforyou@gmail.com. That's workuniversity, the number 4, the letter U, @gmail.com.